Hello everyone and welcome back to a Monster Hunter World playthrough, and today's topic is going to be something I found very interesting in Just for Jules Half Reel. He had pointed out 6 game features. In his words, a game is a rule-based system with a variable and quantifiable outcome where different outcomes are assigned different values. The player exerts effort in order to influence the outcome. The player feels emotionally attached to the outcome, and the consequences of the activity are negotiable. So I looked at Monster Hunter World with a critical eye, looking for the rules, the variable and quantifiable outcome, the values assigned to possible outcomes, the player effort, the player attached to the outcome. So without further ado, let's get started. Valorization of outcome. Jules describes valorization as a means that some of the possible outcomes of the game are better than others. So as you're about to hear, there are a lot of factors that go into Monster Hunter World that make the game easier or harder. Some hunts may be harder than others. Each monster has their own set of strengths and weaknesses. For instance, a monster may be weak to ice, but heavily resistant to fire, thus making the player's attacks do less or more damage depending on which elemental weapon they are using. Speaking of weapons, there are 3 types of weapons. You got your slicing, ballistic, and blunt weapons. Slicing weapons can sever a monster's tail. Doing so would weaken the monster's attacks. Ballistic weapons are good for destroying or ripping through a monster's wings, causing them to fly a lot less. And blunt weapons are good for exhausting and knocking over the monster, thus making the monster attack less frequently, and leaving it wide open to attacks. Depending on what type of armor you wear too, will change the outcome of the battle. Each armor has their own elemental resistance. The higher the resistance, the less damage you take from that element. The lower the resistance, the more damage you receive from that element. In short, there are a lot of various outcomes that can happen in a hunt, so making proper preparations before you head out is necessary for a smoother outcome. The rules. The game, Monster Hunter World, doesn't have many rules or restrictions. For the most part, the game is open. You can be given an objective, and it's up to you on how you want to execute said objective. The game can also be played solo or with friends. Every quest is made doable regardless of the number of hunters in the quest. The only restriction is the map size. Even then, all the maps are filled to the brim with materials, mining outcrops, bone piles, and stuff to help you on your hunt, such as traps and grapple points. Variable quantifiable outcome. Jules states many games have features for ensuring a variable outcome, allowing for handicaps for players in order to even out the skill differences. Monster Hunter World lacks in this section. If a player is struggling in a hunt, there are no handicaps that go into play. The most a player can do is fire an SOS flare and hope another player comes in to help. But the system is kinda flawed, as there is no way to filter the good players from the bad players, so the help you might get may be worse than you, making the hunt more difficult. Player effort. Jules describes player effort as another way of stating that games are challenging or that the games contain a conflict. Monster Hunter World is a great example of you get what you put in. Taking into account a monster's weakness and your weapon's role, the time you put into learning a monster's movements and behaviors, your experience in the game overall, can make the game easier and more enjoyable. The best way to get better at the game is to play the game. more you play, the better you get. Player attached to outcome. Jules describes this as an emotional attachment of the player to the outcome that is a psychological feature of the game's activity. Every fight in Monster Hunter World is a boss fight. You can't KO a monster in a few swings. Every hunt averages 15 to 20 minutes. That being said, when you are finally able to put down the beast, you feel a sense of accomplishment, because it was a well-fought battle between the two of you. It was never a one-sided battle. After a battle, you get some items that you can use to craft weapons and armor. And each one of those weapons and armor pieces that you craft is well earned. And some weapons and armor pieces may have an interesting story behind them.